Sox in the basement.
And welcome into Sox in the Basement. My name is Chris Lanuti. Ed is off this episode, giving him a little bit of a rest. I'm actually taking a rest myself. I'm not actually here. I'm on a beach. I recorded this a few days ago before I skipped town for a couple of days. We're doing our next episode on Saturday, not Friday. That's how I'm kind of setting things up so I can get out of town, enjoy a few days of sun and surf, and then get back to covering White Sox baseball and talking about it with you. A very special episode today, brought to you by our proud sponsors, Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Remember, switch to a new age of life, keeping mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living, or maybe you yourself had an injury or you're going through something right now and you need a little bit of comfort, a little bit of help around your home. Make it so that anybody can get around on their own and live independently with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt works with insurance and has 0% financing for qualified individuals. They have amazing CPAP machines. These things keep getting smaller. They have testing rooms so you can figure out whether or not you have the right machine for you, or if you want to try out something new. Over in Evergreen Park at their headquarters, you can go over there and visit them. They have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors and so much more. Check out Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. See what they can do for you at hhme.com. Okay, as for this special episode, we are currently in the middle of voting for the winner of the $1,000 guest bounty, which is the best guest of the offseason. And the offseason is a long period of time. So you may have missed one of these guests. You may not remember this guest. And that's why today on the show, we're going to play a blurb, just a section of each one of the contestants, the front runners in the voting at this point. Now, here's how you vote. And you're only getting one vote. It is very, very secure. You go to soxinthebasement.com. There's a banner right at the top, either on your mobile device or on your desktop, that says vote. You click on the link and you vote. Same thing if you have a link inside of your show notes. And if you don't have them in the podcast player you're using, like the link doesn't go through, just go to soxinthebasement.com and you can go into this show and you will see the link. It's active at soxinthebasement.com. You can go and vote. The IP address is recorded, so you're not going to get the vote twice. You're not going to get to mess with the votes. There's no bots. That's why I'm not doing it on Twitter, okay? Instead, one vote. If you try to go back in a second time, and I've tested this, it shows your vote from the last time already there. It knows you already voted, and it knows who you voted for. I threw a couple of questions in there I'm just curious about for you listeners. And I think the fourth and final question is, pick your guest of the offseason. You're going to help us determine who's winning a G for bringing us one of the best guests of the offseason. And the group that was helping us do this and contributed so that we could give away this money, Cork and Kerry at the park, 33rd and Princeton, in the shadow of the ballpark, the home of Sox in the Basement there at the ballpark. And you can tell when you show up with that big giant banner at the entryway. Get over there for the award-winning burgers, the ballpark favorites, the incredible array of craft beers that are always rotating, and the amazing service. You get there before the game, they're going to make sure you eat, you get a couple of drinks, you have a couple of laughs, and you make it over there for the game. If you are not getting to Cork and Kerry at the park before and or after the game, you are shorting yourself. You are cheating yourself of the full ballpark experience. Check them out at 33rd and Princeton, right there on the corner. See more at corkandkerry.com. The three guests, I'm just going to randomly throw them in here for you, but enjoy them. We have Don Cooper. We have a group from the University of Chicago that did a biomechanical study. That one was recorded over at the Cork. Also recorded at the Cork was Larry Hawley talking Chicago sports in his time covering sports all throughout Chicago for GN and CLTV. Enjoy this recap of the front-running guest that one of them is going to be the best guest of the offseason and win somebody $1,000 for the $1,000 guest bounty right here on Sox in the Basement.
Yeah, you guys were hot, and the thing was, once you hit it, you hit the gas, and this is something I do every postseason. I wait for every team to lose their second game, because I love the fact that the Sox ran through that postseason with the best record, at least in that era. They only lost one game in that postseason. Like, did you feel that magic during the season? Is that something that as it's happening throughout the postseason, you're like, wow, like when do you start to realize you're special?
That's a good question. And I don't think it's ever been posed, but I can remember many games early in the season and during the season saying, son of a bitch, how did we win that one? We pulled that one out, or something happened that, was like a positive vibe that we made a comeback. We made a good play. We're winning. All of the close games were going in our favor. And I kept saying to myself, probably a half a dozen times in the first, I'm going to say month and a half, like, son of a bitch, this might be our year. And, we continued on with the season. But there was a time also that I felt, and it was really after we clinched in Detroit. We finally got in. Listen, we won 99 games, but yet we didn't know it was in till 3 games left. We won the final game in Detroit. We clinched. Okay, we're in. And now we got 3 more games against the Indians, who were red hot. Everybody was talking about the Indians are going to catch us. But we won 99 games. You know what I mean? I mean, they were playing very well too. It wasn't like the division was a tough division, and Cleveland was a good team. But they were fighting to get in. We get in, we go play Cleveland, we sweep their asses, and it was kind of like we were watching what we were looking like for a while. We were, like I said, won 99 games. We weren't, everybody was thinking more, we're going to blow it, or, things like that. That didn't happen. I mean, but when we clinched in Detroit, it was like we're in, everybody could just kind of breathe and realize that the marathon, our first part of the goal, was achieved. We got our asses in. And, it was a real interesting time, but once we got in, we really started rolling. But there was one moment, I'll bring this up now while it's on my mind, that I said, holy crap, the moon and the stars are now aligned. There's nothing stopping us. And it really did feel like it had a life of its own at one point, that nothing could stop us. But when AJ struck out and ran to first base against the Angels, and all of that happened. Now, I'm not even going to get into analyzing or talking about it, but if you know, you know. If if you're somebody that followed the White Sox, you'll know this moment. Remember the moment. And we came back and beat them. And then we were on a roll after that. Listen, it was a magical year, but yes, there were times that I said, son of a gun, something's going on here. We're pulling out games that, and it's like, how did we do that? Wow. And we became a good team. And what I said earlier, everybody on that team, everybody that came in, can honestly say they contributed. It really was a group effort. And some special moments along the way, like you had mentioned, the complete games, that'll never be done again. I don't see that ever happening again. If it does, God bless whoever's doing it, because now the game has changed. Now you got starters going 4 or 5 innings. Not in my book. The way we saw it, our starters are going 6 innings minimum. And when I say 6 innings, we're just going to you got to go out there and take care of things. And they did. That staff was a magical staff that they went to the post. They stayed healthy. They gave us a chance every single time they went out there. That's the starters. I never was into who's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I never was into those numbers there, because whoever's out there that day is our number 1. And we treated it that way. And in the bullpen also, we had a dynamite bullpen. It was interesting. We had Shingo at one point. Then we had Dustin Hermanson at one point. And then we had Bobby Jenks at one point, being the guy that was trying to get the last out for us. So that's it was a magical year. And I'm always touched when I hear somebody say, well, our parents saw it before they died, and they were in tears and things like that. I'm not real sentimental about a lot of baseball stuff. This year is a little different. Winning a world championship, a little different. But when I hear that one, that kind of reaction from us winning, and all of the people that in some ways had been long-suffering fans had a right to throw their chest out and brag a little bit.
Oh yeah,
on their team and on their team. So to be like, see, it was cool.
You say so many interesting things there. I have like 7 follow-up questions, but there's one that I definitely wanted to ask you about your staff, because when I knew you were coming on, I thought to myself, what is somebody not asked Don Cooper? Or at least I haven't heard them ask. And I think about
good luck.
And I think about your starters. I think everybody always points to Mark Burley, worked really fast. He's got some great stories from that playoff run. People refer to Freddie Garcia as Big Game Freddie. Contreras when he comes over. Everybody was like a name, and then you had a John Garland, and that's who I want to ask you about. That's his career year.
I got stories in my mind, my memory bank, about every name you could bring up on that staff.
Well,
I've got
the guy I want to ask about is Garland. Where does that come from? Where does the John Garland season come from, where he puts that together so well? Because if he doesn't have that season, I don't know if they're as good. Like, he had a great year, and he really put it together, and I think he's like the forgotten guy. Yeah.
Well, he was never forgotten by us. I remember when I first got the job, Jerry Manuel was the manager, and there was a lot of times that John was coming out after 5 innings, and I remember having a conversation about, well, how are we ever going to find out if he can do it or not? Everybody's got their doubts, and, I'm hearing nothing but doubts about you can't only go 6 innings, 5, 6 innings, that's it. And I didn't buy into it. I need that proven to me that's true. And so they started giving him some opportunities. And then he kind of grew into it. The year before, I think it was 2004, hey, listen, he was a young kid trying to make his way still. He wasn't an old, wily veteran. He was still trying to figure out, his assets and how he best uses those assets. And, we were talking about being super aggressive, controlling the count, come up right at people, get contact with the first 3 pitches. You're a ground ball guy. Well, go get him. And then we developed a little bit of a cutter, and he had a good curveball, and he had a good changeup. So, he had all of the physical attributes to be a solid guy, and he did. If you look back on his career, he had a solid career for himself. But it was just kind of like he was ready to blossom because all of the physical was there. And I can remember myself and AJ having a long talk about Garland and the best way to, help him along. So AJ deserves credit for that as well. When we're talking about Garland in particularly, because we want him to be super aggressive. Don't be messing around. We don't want you. Get ahead in the count. Dare them to hit the first, second, or third pitch. And if they don't hit it, you're ahead 0-2 or 1-2. Let's make that our mantra. And that's what he was able to do better. And, as I say that, when I look back on everybody that I came in contact with as a pitching coach, I was always looking and searching for more and more strikes. And when I say strikes, I mean quality strikes. I mean commanded strikes. I was never looking for balls. Now, don't get me wrong. We had days where, a lot of our guys could get ahead. So there were practice days we'd have, all right, we're practicing nothing but 0-2, 1-2 put-away pitches. We're practicing put-away pitches here. And, that could be something up above the zone. It could be stuff below the zone. And, we practice balls rarely is what I'm saying. We were practicing and working for strikes. and attacking, because that's how you get deeper in games. Listen, part of watching some baseball now for me, and I don't watch much, is starters going 3, 4 innings, 5 innings. I remember somebody coming up in one of the last meetings with the White Sox saying, well, we can hope for 4 innings out of them. No, time out. I can't utter those words. I'm not hoping for 4. I'm saying 6 minimum. That's your job. That's why they get paid bigger money, starters, because their job is a little bit bigger and a little bit more, not necessarily important, but it is more important because the starting pitcher you put out there, he's the most, in my mind, the most important guy on the field, because if he takes care of his stuff, everything's going to be right where it needs to be. And then, we completed all those games. It was a different time. Now science has taken over. And then when you think about it, it's taken over a lot of different things, not only baseball, and the newest thing is going to be the automated strike zone. I can't wait to see that in some ways. What's the umpire going to be doing? He's just going to be standing back there and maybe get hit with foul balls, maybe get hit with a pitch. He's not calling balls and strikes, is he? I don't know.
No, he's not doing it. He's doing a lot less.
So he's like a mannequin. He's going to call safe and out at home plate. How often does that come up?
Explain to everybody, Alex, what you guys do. Because you worked recently with the White Sox, and I believe it was last January, about a year ago, they would have gotten the results of what you did for them. But explain what it is that you guys do.
Yeah, so both Devin and I work in the data space, right? We're working on an applied data science master's at the University of Chicago. The White Sox actually reached out for some work, right, from a student group to basically analyze what is kind of like a newer set of data, right, that is right for the type of data science and AI applications that we focused on. And so as part of our capstone, project for that program, we basically did I think about a 9-month program, right, Devin? Which was pretty intense. I think pretty difficult, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, so it was, you could do part-time or full-time. I think you were full-time, or?
I was part-time.
You were part-time, you were both part-time. And so you take a set of classes and move on, but capstone aligned at the same time. And yeah, it was a lottery pick almost, so you have a lottery system to what projects you want to sign up for. And I think I put White Sox my top 3, maybe you did the same.
Yep.
And we were both, on the same project with 2 other guys, and it was a great experience.
So what you guys did was look at biometric data, if I'm not mistaken, to then try to figure out, one, how the White Sox could fix players that they already have, things that players could do differently, but then 2, how they could almost like scout for players that may have a deficiency but could get better at what they do, maybe hit better if they change something. Take me through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a ton of different use cases, right? But there's this kind of new class of biomechanical data. You can think about it really as...
It's as if they know we're doing a show.
I know, exactly.
You know what it is? It's excitement over the fact that the White Sox actually went out and started using like biometrics and analytical data and started catching up, and maybe might be doing something ahead of what other teams are doing, and that's what I'm excited about hearing about. So you take me through this again now. So what did you exactly go and do for them?
So we focused on digging into biomechanical data for them, right? So this massive data set of data, which comes from these kind of high velocity cameras. They're able to capture basically like all of these movements of the human body, right? And so you think angles, velocities, momentum, etc., of all these body parts that are important across swinging. In particular, what we focused on was hitting, right? So there's all sorts of other applications, but basically these Hawkeye systems will allow you to capture this kind of massive quantity of data that you've never been able to capture, right, on how the human body moves and how it translates to sport performance. And so what we focused on was, trying to basically dig through that massive pile of data and then be able to extract insights. Some of that is insights to potentially identify, players that are undervalued in the market. And another approach might be to try to improve the players that you have by identifying, the things that they can do mechanically, right, to improve their performance, right? Notably things like bat speed and other aspects like that.
All right, so Devin, it sounds like there's a lot of data. There's a lot of different things that you're looking at. You're trying to break it all down. How difficult is it to find that missing piece? Because here's the thing, it's very easy to say, we're going to go and we're going to do something that nobody else has done before. We're going to find some kind of, inequity, some kind of thing that no other team has found before. But you don't want to make something up. You don't want to be like, well, we got to come up with some result. So how do you make sure that you're getting something that's real and tangible that the team can use?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the hardest thing I think initially was just getting all of the data, from the Hawkeye tracking system and just understanding it. Right, that's the first step. Is looking at all these data and figuring out what actually matters and what contributes to a great hit and what doesn't contribute. There's a lot of noise involved as well. So part of the job, the biggest actually task that we had was just getting rid of that noise and focusing on what metrics actually matter, right? Because the biomechanical data, it takes in everything. It's angles from your ankles to your knees to your wrists to your head to where your chest is facing at all different points throughout your hit. So I think the biggest obstacle was just to figure out what can we focus on and what's like something that doesn't really affect the outcome that we're looking for.
Now, I don't want to give away anything that the White Sox did, but Alex, I think about when you gave this data to the White Sox, which would be a year ago in January. I think about a prospect that they had by the name of Colson Montgomery that we talked about so much, especially at the beginning of last season on Sox in the Basement. And the idea that Colson was getting to every level in the minors and was actually getting worse. His batting average is going down, his power numbers are going down, his on-base percentage was going down. He wasn't getting better, he was kind of going backwards. And we didn't even think he would be a call-up last year. They go and work with him individually in Arizona. He comes out, now he's a guy with a potential of 50 home runs a year. He's a guy who's number 88 on who's the best players in Major League Baseball right now, according to MLB Network.
Yep.
Okay, and so now all of a sudden, everyth's turned around for him. How would data like what you collected impact a Colson Montgomery? Because I'm sure you want to take some credit for something like that, right?
I think it would be crazy for us to take credit for that, right? I do think that the fact that the White Sox are kind of investing in this biomechanics data, right, and the team that really did that, which is the team we worked with, is that biomechanics team with data science kind of in partnership. I think that team's work, is probably a large contributor, right, to what has happened with Colson, right, and as well as his work as well. And if you think about a guy like Miguel Vargas too, right, who also had a major swing change throughout the year and had a pretty large, increase in performance from say like March, April onwards as a result of that. I do think that what we saw at least was there are changes you can make in a swing to really dramatically increase things like bat speed and other elements, right? That would, I think help improve performance, right? And I think it's just exciting to see the Sox investing in that type of analysis.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really interesting because I think whenever we hear that there's a new hitting coach or there's a hitting guru now in Ryan Fuller, that it's going to be a guy that's going to just look at a guy in the cage and go, oh, you got a hitch in your giddy up, or like just kind of lean this way a little bit or level this out. But what you're telling me is there's like 1,000 points of data that say, no, this is where we can fix this player. Is it bat speed? Is it the way that they're swinging at? Like, is there, without giving away things that would be almost proprietary to the White Sox, I don't want to give away any of their advantage, but like what kind of things did you see that are important in a hitter?
I mean, I think the whole league, believes in bat speed, right? And so it becomes a question of how to generate it, just being an important measure.
And you guys may be figuring out how to generate it.
Our hope was, I think to help to that extent, right? But I'm sure, most other teams, I'm sure, are kind of focused on the same problem. So I think that's a pretty universal concept that people are focused on. We also did look at other parts of the swing. I think those are really difficult to peel apart. Like, it's hard to know exactly what the angle of the swing should be like. There's been a lot of debate in baseball around uppercut, swings and kind of the change in approach, across the inning.
There's the whole launch angle idea.
Exactly, the whole launch angle.
Want to go at 27 degrees, that's the best way to do it. And all of Major League Baseball tried to do that, but it doesn't work for everybody.
No, exactly. And I think you see when you get into the complexities of biomechanical data, right, that one size fits all approach is kind of silly, when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of data points. But more than anything, I think the Sox need to, and they seem to be pushing forward their sophistication, across all forms of hitting, right? It's not just bat speed, it's not just angle, right? It's really being able to kind of create these tailored plans for specific players. And I think that's the way of the future. If you look at the organizations that are the most successful, that's what they're doing, right? Is they're not one size fits all. They're really creating these kind of like sophisticated, tailored plans to get the most out of every hitter.
What is it like covering a team in a big city that's different than covering a small town team or a college team?
Well, in some ways it's the same principle. Now, when I was a producer and I was a reporter, I go out here and I go out there. It's really the same principles. It's you're trying to get the information. You're trying to, I guess for me, leave an impression that you're trying to work hard and you're trying to do those things. And I wasn't a beat reporter. And I have to distinguish myself. Those beat reporters work incredibly hard. For the radio stations, the newspapers, and for the on-air television, it's a very difficult job. I think in some ways the same principle is the same, but it's a whole lot different because there's a whole lot more people, there's a whole lot more eyeballs that are watching it. So certainly you're more in the crosshairs, and not in the crosshairs in a bad way. You're just there. People see you. That's why you work up. You want to get people a chance to see and hear your work. So it's a little bit different. It's not a little bit different. It's a lot different. But at the same point, for me, it was the same principles. Tell a good story. Tell an accurate story. For TV, when I would get a chance to do a good video. The fundamentals don't change, and they're not different, even if obviously a lot of things are different, because it is so much bigger. At least that's how I view it. Everyone who's in the media pool will view it differently. A beat writer for a Major League Baseball team that's covering 162 games, they view it differently. It's different for everybody. That's the experience that I had. When I was on the web, I was a lot of in-house and trying to find stuff and doing Zoom interviews or going out here and there. And for me, it was, just trying to do what I could to put the best product out there with what I had. Maybe it's a simple explanation. That's just how I always viewed it.
How hard is it, getting interviews in sports? I feel like it's almost harder now because I watch these exchanges sometimes where somebody doesn't like a question.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the reporter's a villain for asking, like, the right question,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mark DeRosa is still dancing around the fact that he thought that he'd already made it into the next round, and it's so obvious that he thought. I mean, look at his lineup. He puts in a Paul Goldschmidt, who's like, of all Major League Baseball players, 5th worst, I think, in OPS against right-handed pitching, and he starts him against a righty. Like he benches a couple of big stars, and he's talking in the pregame that like some of these guys are suffering because they were out partying the night before. It really, and now he's trying to cover for it, and it's almost like, I don't know, maybe it's just a fan's perspective and I'm not in the room with the beat reporters, but it's almost like nobody wants to just keep trying to hammer him to get him because he's just dancing around it. How hard is that? Because you have relationships with these guys, but you also sometimes look at them and you go, you're full of it. I mean, like, how hard is that?
I think it is hard because I think and it's something I focused a lot on later in my career was how do I build trust with people? And, I wasn't going out every day, but even just trust, even if I would do an interview here or there, even in anything you do now. And I think that is hard. It's a hard balance to make. It's a hard thing to do. And I give a lot of these beat reporters credit. We've got to do it every day. And it's difficult. It's a difficult balance. And I think people have done that since the beginning of time. And you just find your way to do it. I don't think it's a case of where, somebody's weak or somebody's not wanting to do something. It's just different. And I think that you've just got to figure out what it is where that middle ground is. And people have done it more often than I did. But I think you try to find that. I remember in Indy when I was really going out there every day, I tried to find that. And in many ways I didn't succeed. And in some ways I did. It's a variable thing. It's a back and forth thing, and it's an everyday thing.
What do you think about this White Sox team? I mean, you're a sports fan. First of all, before you even get into them, how do you watch sports now? Is it different for you? I mean, you're a fan, but you covered it for so long. Have you started to find your fandom since you got out of covering things on a daily basis?
I find that sports are different to watch the last 10 years.
Yeah.
It's not as, when I was young, I was really into it. Everything, had all of it. Really into it in my 20s, covering it. Really intense, doing those things. For me, I watch, and I don't know if what people will think of this, I watch sports as theater. I'm interested in enjoying the experience, watching how things are going to play out. And yes, I think my time in media didn't make me a super hardcore of a fan, and maybe it took some of that away. It didn't mean I don't have passion for it. I just view it in a different way. I view it in storylines. Like, I always say, for instance, like when it came to the Bears losing to the Rams in the divisional round, yeah, it was bad the Bears lost, but what a beautiful game. Yeah. That Caleb Williams throw, and I have to do maybe a little more, is probably the second best play in a Chicago sports team's loss of all time. It might be the best. I've thought about it.
In any Chicago sports team's loss.
I have to look at it because for me, there's one that always stands out, and it's not for me, for the Cubs, Game 7, 2003, Kerry Wood's game-tying homer.
Okay.
I was outside the ballpark. It's the loudest thing I've ever heard. It was the release of so much tension that had built up because of what happened at the end of Game 6.
Yeah.
And I think it was a true release moment. It was something so unique in the history of Chicago sports that you really can't think of. There really is, for me,
Devin Hester's kickoff return
was number one.
Super Bowl. Yeah.
Hester's is always number one.
I'm sitting here as you're talking thinking, what is number one?
Yeah, and number one was Hester's, because I thought about this. Right after Caleb Williams, I really thought about it. Hester is probably number one. I think Kerry Wood, in my mind, now for Southside fans, it wouldn't be.
Of course not.
But with how the release of tension, that was incredible.
Right.
And for Wood, he hit it hard. I remember being outside the ballpark and caught the trajectory of the ball as it went out for the last 3 or 4 seconds. Hester's is number one, and I don't think there's anything of it. I've tried to think of others. I've tried to think of White Sox plays.
Well, for White Sox ones, I don't know if it's for an entire... for a game, it wouldn't be for a game, but it'd be for a series. The last time that they get into the postseason, Larry Garcia hits that 3-run home run, and I was in that ballpark, and I thought it was going to fall down, but they didn't win that series.
No.
It didn't really matter in the end.
I've thought about it for the White Sox. I reflected on the '83 series, and the '83 series is weird. I've always thought for performances in a loss. I think Britt Burns' pitching performance in Game 4 against the Orioles.
God, my father never stops talking about it.
And it's interesting because it was the only thing he really did. I know that the Orioles got 3 that inning, and I'm remembering how many that were charged to him. But the Tito Landrum homer, that's what you think of painful moments in the history of Chicago sports in losses. I think the Landrum homer is really up there because that White Sox, that was the World Series. I think the White Sox beat the Phillies. That was the Phillies team that had their run in 1980. That was their year. They were aging a little bit in '83, and the Orioles took care of business. But it's a very interesting question. And if anybody has any others, because I've thought about it, but for me, it's Hester, it's Kerry Wood, and it's Caleb. I think it's Hester, Wood, 1, 2, and then it's Caleb. I think Caleb's 3, and I'm always happy to be corrected because I forget things.
Well, I'm putting Caleb 2 because I don't really care what
Sox would, but Sox fans would.
I was rooting openly for the Marlins in that series.
And the Marlins made it's kind of funny and looking back on it when you reflect on it, just how good that Marlins team really was.
I will tell you a true story, and then we'll get back on the Sox a little bit more here. I'm sitting in a bar, El Chula's, on Illinois Street downtown in River North, and my uncle's sitting next to me, and the two of us are watching this game. Neither one of us are Cubs fans. And the moment that kid reached out, Bartman, and interferes with the ball, remember, they're still up by multiple runs. And we both started laughing at the bar going, watch the Marlins come back and win this whole thing, and they're going to blame that poor guy. And we made that joke right there in the bar as Sox fans, basically saying, this is how it goes for the Cubs, and they'll blame this poor kid out there and that's exactly what happened.
And it's funny because I was outside the ballpark, and they started chanting the word that everybody talks about. And somebody told me about it, and I said, you know what I said? I said, who cares? Because it happened, it was either Paul Baca or Damian Miller in one of the first 2 games. Went up there, the fan knocked it out. I think it was in Game 2 where the Cubs won big. The thing that stunned me was so my dad left it, because we were on Waveland, we didn't see it. My dad left the tape of Game 6 for me to watch it. I didn't know about Gonzalez. We just heard gasp. That was the play for me.
That was the play.
And Calvin Gonzalez was so good for the Cubs that year. It was his worst play. That's what got me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.